Burning Man is an 80,000 person, explicitly pagan festival in the Nevada desert outside of Reno. It started in the 1990s on Baker Beach in San Francisco, but soon grew so big that they had to move it to the desert, and the playa, or dry lake bed, outside of Reno, Nevada, seemed to be the most logical choice. They say that the man that gets burned on Saturdays during the festival doesn't represent anything in particular. It's pretty safe to say that the man represents patriarchal society, civilization, and much more. So the entire idea is that you go to Burning Man to cast off the oppression of modern civilization, and you express yourself in whatever way seems most right to you. So it's a bit about radical individualism, and I recommend Carl Trueman's book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, for a bit more on that subject. Burning Man first became popular because of the Bay Area's strong countercultural ethos. So you think about the 1960s and the hippie movement, you think about the way that they rebelled from conventional society. Burning Man was very much an outgrowth of that. One of the things that fueled Burning Man's rise, of course, was the tech industry.
Eric Schmidt is the CEO that made Google what it is today. You probably know that the first Google Doodle was 1998. Burning Man week, Larry Page and his buddies put the Burning Man symbol on their webpage, and that was the very first Google Doodle. And it was them announcing to Silicon Valley we're burners first. And so Google culture has been completely enmeshed within the Burning Man culture. In fact, so much so that they would have buses in those earlier years bringing Google personnel to Burning Man, allowing them to go back. They would, in fact, do in-house videos on how to handle yourself when you as a Google employee go to Burning Man. And Burning Man art was what would fashion the walls of Google's headquarters. And so when Larry Page was looking for a new CEO, the CEO to make Google what it is today, they picked Eric Schmidt. Why did they pick Eric Schmidt, who, by the way, now is one of the most important and powerful men on the planet? Because he had Burning Man on his resume. And so I have to tell my class, my students, and I tell this to Christian conferences sometimes, is that whether you realize it or not, you're all digital burners already, because you're all using the products that have been designed, incubated, imagined in environments like this.
So you have many young urban professionals making tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. They're coming out of major American universities. They have liberal values. In San Francisco, you have a city where basically anything goes. But anything can't exactly go in the city. If you want to shoot fire up into the air, if you want to have giant outdoor raves, if you want to participate in all sorts of degeneracy, you can't just do that on any street corner. So Burning Man provides license for many people in the Bay Area and now around the world to, as they say, let your freak flag fly. Burning Man takes place every year on the week leading up to Labor Day Monday. The general public is allowed to enter the festival grounds on Monday prior to Labor Day, and you have to leave on Labor Day. Everyone heads home. There's no fixed schedule to the festival except for the burn of the man, which happens on Saturday night, so the Saturday before Labor Day. On Sunday night, they also burn something that's called the temple, and if you want to think about burning the man as a big celebration, the temple is generally more somber. People tend to think of Burning Man as a spiritually enlightening experience because it allows them to discover their inner selves. Like, oh, I can be anything I want here. I can do anything I want here. I can express myself however I want. And so they go to Burning Man with the idea that self-expression is inherently spiritual. Whatever it is you have inside yourself, whoever it is that you want to be, whatever it is you want to experience, you indulging or doing that is framed as spiritual. And so people can go there, they can take drugs, they can party, they can have all kinds of sexual experiences, they can explore tenets about various Eastern religions, mysticism, etc. And the entire thing is framed as you pursuing your own interests, you pursuing what is inside your heart is inherently spiritual and is inherently good. The idea is that the heart knows the truth, and by pursuing what's in your heart, you are expressing yourself spiritually, and expressing ourselves spiritually in their mind is universally good. So people experience Burning Man as this opportunity to go do whatever it is they want and express themselves in ways that they can't do at home in their constrained 9-to-5 everyday lives. That's framed as very oppressive. That's framed as very much about suppressing inner truth. You get to go to Burning Man, and for 1 week a year, you get to express your inner truth however that shows up. And people experience that as a very spiritual thing as compared to dogmatic religious practice like going to church, etc. I first went to Burning Man in 2003. I was part of the tech industry in the late 90s and in the early 2000s, and Burning Man was generally a known thing in some circles in that world. I was part of the electronic music rave scene. I was a DJ in that world, and we all knew about Burning Man in that community, but other people in the professional world didn't know about it. So it was kind of kept on the down low, sort of. People would talk about going to Burning Man, and it was very odd that at the end of every August, people would say, "Oh, hey, I'm going to a family reunion." And so family reunion was the euphemism we all used to tell each other, like, yeah, I'm going to Burning Man, while the quote unquote normies in that world had no idea about it. And then finally went for the first time in 2003. And in 2003, the festival was like 30,000 people. It wasn't all that big comparatively. You could still walk around in it. Back then, Burning Man was kind of unruly, as in it didn't really follow any rules, a bit like Mad Max. So you had art cars blazing across the playa, you had flamethrowers going into the night sky, you had lasers everywhere, you had crazy parties, but it wasn't as explicitly pagan as it is now. It was generally like the Wild West. We don't really know what this is, but we're going to take advantage of the wide open space and have a good time. That then changed over the 10 years that I was gone, finally going back in 2013, when Burning Man had gone from this niche thing that a few people in the tech industry knew about to something that defined San Francisco culture. And so that brought a lot more money, that brought a lot more ideology, that brought a whole professionalism feel. You went from having dune buggies fitted up with lights to multi-million-dollar art and sound cars with giant speakers as nice as any nightclub. Burning Man went pro in that time and became much more polished. The difference of 10 years was massive in the festival. And so then I finally went back again a third time in 2015, and that's when I encountered the underground Christian ministry there. In 2015, I found my way into an underground Christian ministry at Burning Man that had been there for 12 years. And if you want to check the link in the show notes, I actually did an interview with 4 of the members of that camp, Camp Spirit Dream, for my 2-year anniversary episode. And so they had been going for, I guess, 12 years at that point, showing the love of God the Father to the lost. It wasn't necessarily an evangelistic endeavor explicitly. There wasn't a big cross set up outside. They weren't handing out Bibles. They were just there to listen and bring a Christian presence, a faithful Christian presence to the festival. That's where they found me, and they encountered thousands of people over the course of the 15 years they did the ministry in total. So I met them in 2015. I believe their last year was 2017. And so they would bring the love of God the Father to the lost. And the truth is, I think many people in the New Age world are looking for the love of the Father that they didn't grow up knowing in their families. And so they have a lot of resentment towards their fathers. They have a lot of father hunger. So they reject God the Father and they go seeking out into the world for the other mystical and spiritual traditions that are there. But the idea was that if you could bring the love of God the Father as reflected in Scripture, bring that part of his character to Burning Man, you can minister to the lost in a way that particularly hurts them. That was certainly attractive to me. One of the other things that was attractive to me about them was the feeling in the camp. There was just a feeling of real peace, a genuine peace there amongst the people who were in the camp and who ran the camp. They had very strict protocols. So they treated this like any missionary effort that you'd see around the world. They prepared for it for a year. People would train for it. They would do trainings. They had protocols for which people would be sent home if they weren't doing their job or fell off the path. They would have to do all kinds of reconciliation processes to make sure no one was harboring secret sin, because Burning Man was such a high pressure environment spiritually that anything that was in the field or anything that was between them would come out. So they took this very, very seriously as an evangelistic missionary effort. And I was very grateful for that. And that was communicated to me through simply encountering the camp. The people in the camp later became my friends, and I've spent many times with them. They baptized me in 2020, which of course was a beautiful memory. And so I think what the message of the evangelistic effort there was at the time was that there is actually hope for many of the New Age people that are there. Now, the people of Camp Spirit Dream have been very honest in saying they came under spiritual attack. They were given cursed items. All kinds of very shady spiritual things happened to them. But of course, with the power of God and the blood of Christ protecting them, they were kept safe from all of that. So of course, there are definitely apostles of false religion there. there are also refugees. There are also people imprisoned by false religion, as I was. It took me a long time to understand what I'd been exposed to, but I knew through meeting them immediately that there was something different about them, which is why when they returned to Nevada a couple months later to do a class called The Art of Hearing God, essentially about prayer, I went to go see them again, and then I traveled to spend Christmas with them that year, and that was when I really got to see that their Christian faith wasn't just something they brought out into the world, it was something they carried with them at home. I wasn't even close to being a Christian. I was still very much a pagan. I was still very much an idolater at that time, but they welcomed me into their homes. They put me up in a guest room. They fed me. They're hunters. They fed me bear and pheasant and rabbit, and they drank wine and they sang songs. And it was the first experience I'd ever had of what I thought Christianity could be. And that is what really made an impression on me more than anything they shared with me on the playa, more than even the visionary experience I had. It was meeting the Christians who lived as Christians, who embodied Christianity, who brought the love of God out into the world, and I could feel it. And I remember that being the very first time in my life that I seriously started considering Christianity as a valid, we'll say, religion or spiritual path. Of course, I had my own road to walk at that point, but that Christmas 2015 was a very powerful turning point for me.